What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp, managing editor of Fightful.com and FightfulMMA.com. UFC 221 tonight. This is technically the February 10th show. It's February 11th right now. It's like February 15th or something in Australia right now. I can't even keep track. But before I get into this, we have more Australia news. Anna Bauer, reporter for Fightful.com, will be at this upcoming weekend's New Japan show in Perth, where the UFC was tonight. So that's worth checking out. Also, I have video updates and tons of articles over on Fightful.com and YouTube.com/Fightful on the UFC and especially the Chris Cyborg situation. I am joined by the guy that you see delivering, exclusives every single day, James Lynch. You got an exclusive with Sarah Morris's cat.
I did. Tumbles. Everyone's going to get to meet Tumbles if they go to Fightful.com.
Now, what's the name of yours in the back there?
Oh, he's there. That's Fuji.
I have a soft spot for Siamese cats.
He's not Siamese. Everyone gets that wrong. He's a British short hair seal point.
I used to have a seal point, but
so he's got the the Siamese look with the seal point, but he's a British short hair. So
does he shed a lot? When my seal point always shed like crazy.
Yes, he does shed a lot. He's sometimes, if you see some of my interviews, you'll see him in the background. He likes to hang out. Yeah. He's kind of like my silent co-host, but I'm hoping he'll. It looks like he's just being a regal right now. He's going to sit in the corner, so it's all good.
Well, guys, that's all we got. Thank you for joining the Fightful.com Cat Podcast. James Lynch joining me tonight. You know, it's funny because as all these events were starting to pile up. It's looking like you will be at UFC 223 in a couple of months.
Yeah.
My God, that weekend is going to be the most psychotic weekend that a crossover website could ever cover. Friday night, Bellator MMA, and a ton of WrestleMania weekend events. Saturday night, at the same time, James, you will be at UFC 223. WWE NXT TakeOver and Ring of Honor, all running shows. UFC used to steer clear of WrestleMania weekend, but they're going all in on this one.
Yeah, and it's one of their biggest cards of the year. I mean, you've got the lightweight fight. You've got the Rose rematch with Joanna. I mean, they always do this every now and then. They'll throw like a really good card in sort of a few months before International Fight Week and give sort of some nice flavor. It used to be sort of the Conor McGregor card, but since he's nowhere to be found, this is what they've replaced it with. But I'm looking forward to that card in a couple months. And as soon as I saw the lineup, I was like, I got to go. We got to make this happen.
So, this UFC 221 show, by the way, guys, I'll probably be doing like 3 shows that night somehow. It's going to be crazy. And Joe's going to be covering Titan FC that weekend, doing commentary. So I don't know who I'm going to track down for that, but I'll track down somebody. But UFC 221, man, on paper, this was not a good looking show, at least from a headliner perspective, from a marquee perspective. But I think that almost all the right people that UFC needed to won this show. The UFC's heavyweight division, the stock just shot through the roof. Lots of good stuff tonight.
Yeah, good card. It started off a little bit slow with those 3 straight decisions, and then you had a couple finishes. And really, I think the benefit of this card tonight, like you were saying, the guys are supposed to win, is we got to see a lot of the up and comers get big victories. I mean, we talked about, we haven't talked about it yet, but Israel making his debut, obviously looking very good there. You have Jake Matthews getting a win tonight. He's been on a bit of a rough stretch. Alex Volkanovski. Dominant win over Jeremy Kennedy, who was previously undefeated. I mean, there's so much to talk about on this card, but really, I think, you had this great main event to sort of cap things off, but I think the focus of tonight was really on sort of the up-and-comers, and I'm cool with that. They need to do a better job of promoting fighters, and I think this was a good sampling of that tonight.
So the headline fight, Yoel Romero versus Luke Rockhold. My God, I'm going to try to explain to my wife the UFC middleweight title situation. This was half of a title fight. Yoel Romero missed weight. He took the fight on about 4 weeks' notice, and he is a very thick middleweight at that. But, I mean, Luke Rockhold is also a giant middleweight, but he knew that he was going to fight well before this. Robert Whittaker had a stomach infection, was unable to make it to Perth to fight, and Yoel Romero became the not UFC interim middleweight champion on this show. It started off kind of slow. This is Rockhold's game a lot of the time. He'll stay on the outside, and Romero seemed to, very comfortable with allowing that to happen. In the second round, we saw Romero go to the body a lot after he rocked Rockhold with a shot, and then things slowed down again. out of nowhere, the power of Romero puts Rockhold to sleep. In our preview on the Holy Smokes MMA podcast, which airs Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern, this is something that we kind of talked about, myself and Joe. There's, you always hear explosive, but it was Rockhold who had half the average time in cage than Yoel Romero. Yoel Romero, on average, goes about this long in his fights, about 12 minutes. Luke Rockhold goes about 6.5. So this was the Yoel Romero game, and it played to perfection, apparently, James.
Certainly did. I mean, just as sort of the fight was going along, that's the thing with Yoel Romero is, he's always got that knockout punch. And, it just sort of, the fight was sort of steadily going along. You didn't really know what was going to happen. And then out of the nowhere, Romero just lands that shot and Rockhold's out. And I mean, anytime Luke Rockhold fights, I hate to say it, he still leaves his chin out there a little bit. His defense isn't that great. And, he paid the price for it tonight against, one of the, probably the, biggest power puncher in the division, at least in my opinion, is, in Yoel Romero. So, it happens, that's the risk when you fight a guy like this. You can be as tactical as you want heading into a fight, but there's always that risk of getting knocked out, and Rockhold paid the price. And, it's hard to believe now, Rockhold's lost 2 of his last 3 fights. Kind of crazy for a guy that looked like he was going to be dominating the middleweight division for a while when he beat Chris Weidman, but not the case anymore.
Even you look at Romero, and virtually everybody thought that Jacare won that fight. So yeah, you could argue that Yoel Romero is 2-2 over his last 4, and he beat Chris Weidman and knocked him out pretty viciously. And that's really the only guy in that division, like maybe Gastelum, but Gastelum, like there's that carousel of guys that they just beat each other. And now Robert Whittaker's in a situation where there's I mean, you could give it to Romero, but Romero just lost to Whittaker.
Yeah,
and
I know.
Lost to Whittaker on one leg. I thought that was movie style comeback that Robert Whittaker beat his ass on one leg, and then the next fight he didn't make weight, and Dana White didn't seem that upset by missing weight, considering the late notice per se. How did you react to that? Because it's not a surprise these days anymore. When this happens, it's just not a surprise when it happens anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, Romero, what's Romero's track record? I don't think he's ever missed weight before, heading into a fight. So, a little bit surprising. Who knows what the circumstances were? I often wonder when they do these cards in, different places, whether it was Brazil, we had the whole issue last week with the hotel. You never know what to sort of expect, but it's a bummer. 2 pounds is, the difference between wearing gold tonight and not wearing gold. It's kind of crazy to think that way, but just the middleweight division, I think, is just cursed at this point. You had the whole thing with Bisping, holding out for the GSP fight, and then you have these interim titles, and Whittaker was supposed to be on this card. I don't know what's happening now, but and I don't even know what you do. There's an argument that's out there right now that says that even though Romero won this fight, he should still have to fight someone else to fight Whittaker. Just because he missed weight. I don't know about that, but there's so many weight. It's really up in the air right now. You've got basically 3 people right now sort of in the carousel with Romero. It's, Weidman, Gastelum, and Jacare at this point. And other than that, there's a bit of a drop off. So I don't know what the UFC does here. I don't know, when Whittaker is going to be back, but it's a lot of confusion right now in that division.
Oh my God. That division in 6-7 months could be the top 15 is going to be crazy, because Machida, I didn't think he beat Eric Anders. He probably shouldn't even be there. You have Vitor Belfort, who is supposedly retiring soon. Uriah Hall, who said that he almost died trying to make middleweight. Well, I don't get the feeling he'll be fighting there much longer. Michael Bisping has a retirement fight scheduled. Luke Rockhold has often flirted with the idea of moving to 205. Romero, even though he missed weight, I don't think that he's going to be moving up. But that's 4 or 5 names. They just had Anderson Silva drop out of the rankings because of the suspension and everything. That's 5 or 6 of your top 15 names that just fall right out. And you do have some promising guys in there. You have Paulo Costa and Thiago Santos, who has looked really, really good. But Thiago Santos isn't ready for a title shot. I mean, I guess if they were really, really pushed up against the wall and they had a show to book in Australia, they could do that. It's not probably going to draw on pay-per-view, but it would put asses in seats with Robert Whittaker, sure. But man, what a mess. Uriah Hall is still ranked number 9 in that division.
Yeah, I don't know what you do, and it's funny. You talked about Rockhold there. I threw a tweet out before we did the show saying, I wonder if Rockhold moves up to light heavyweight at this point. I mean, he's lost 2 fights now. Middleweight division's a little crowded at the moment, like we just mentioned those contenders and everything. Like maybe he does do that because you saw the post-fight interview or the post interview he did at the weigh-ins yesterday. He sounded awful and he looked awful, and it looks like it is a tough cut for him. So I wonder if maybe going up to light heavyweight would be better. And of course, I'm getting all these people tweeting me saying, "Oh, well, that's not going to change his chin." I get that, but I'm just saying if he's he's a tall guy for the division, I think he would fill out well in light heavyweight. And looking at the top 10 in light heavyweight, might be a better fit for him at this point.
2 fights away from a title fight there, maybe.
Pretty much, exactly. And DC's fighting at heavyweight, so it wouldn't be sort of a conflict there. So who knows? Yeah,
and Gustafsson. I mean, if Gustafsson gets another win, he's probably getting a title shot at some point. But the man never fights. Yeah. And then after that, like I've often said this, Shogun Rua is like on the fringe of getting a title shot in that division in 2018.
He's like number 6.
Yeah, and it has like 3 wins in a row. And had he fought when he was supposed to last year and won, he might have been in the conversation. Oh my God, it's such a mess, the middleweight and light heavyweight divisions. And even heavyweight until tonight was looking a little grim here and there. And there was a spot, I thought that like the 3 super fights that were being teased all made sense outside of maybe bantamweight because you have Jimmy Rivera and Marlon Moraes, but those 2 can fight each other to determine the next contender. And then that would make sense. There's no clear-cut contender at flyweight. There's none at heavyweight. There's none at light heavyweight. There's none at women's featherweight. And they just made Raquel Pennington and Amanda Nunes, and that's fine. She was about as clear-cut of a contender as there was there. But if she loses, then there's none there either.
Yeah. I know it's true. It's just a weird sort of state we're in right now as far as every division, and you just mentioned it there. There's nothing really clear cut, and I think because there's so many fighters in the UFC, you have to have like one of those highlight reel spectacular performances, and we just haven't seen that from a lot of these fighters, and that's just the reality. So now it's just run of the mill, right? So
I think the Max Holloway injury really forced UFC's hand because I thought they were going to go all in on all those three super fights, and they kind of had to split it up a little bbit, and they had Pennington and Nunes and Brazil and Cyborg. The funniest thing is when people were like, card saved. It's like Yana Kunitskaya. Yeah, sure. She saved the show, guys. But otherwise, I thought the UFC would have done well to do like a super fight series where each show for 3 months was headlined by a super fight. I thought that could have been really great stuff. And they have, I think it's Caitlin Vieira fighting Kat Zingano. Sure, let the winner fight Cyborg or whatever in the future because Caitlin Vieira would probably be 145 or anyway. But that's the rabbit hole we're down. There is no clear-cut contender. You think Tyron Woodley wants to fight Robert Whittaker? He gets that super fight that he wants so bad?
No, he's probably going to fight Nate Diaz by the looks of it.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
Don't even get me started on that, but yeah.
That is such a... I mean, hey, maybe it'll sell some pay-per-views, but it'll be.
We gotta have some sort of ranking system here. I mean, if that's my biggest thing with the Diaz fight. It's just like he's coming off a loss. I get that
he shouldn't be ranked. He hasn't fought since 2016.
Exactly, and he hasn't fought at welterweight since Rory McDonald threw him to the other side of the octagon.
Yeah, my God.
Do you remember that? He just suplexed him.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, Woodley will wrestle the hell out of Nate Diaz. My God.
Yeah.
That's your main event, guys. Yoel Romero did not become UFC middleweight champion, but there was some other fun stuff on the show. Curtis Blaydes defeated Mark Hunt, and he weathered one hell of a storm. This is a man he'll be 27, I think, next week. He has an 82-inch reach. He's got one loss. That's to Francis Ngannou. He's taken Francis Ngannou and Mark Hunt's best shots and has lived to tell about it. Stayed conscious in both. Has a great wrestling background. Should be riding a 4-fight winning streak right now if it wasn't for that BS overturn of the marijuana failure. But after that first round, Curtis Blaydes looked good, and he took the air right out of that room.
Yeah, and I saw some people on social media. I mean, of course, you're going to get that. Probably people who are putting money on Hunt saying that, it was unimpressive. But look, he's a good wrestler. He could get the takedown, and it's not like he was on top just stalling. He was landing shots. He was, trying to advance his position. I thought it was a great performance tonight from Curtis Blaydes, and I threw a tweet out there tonight, talking about the matchmaking. I thought it was a great move because, you have Blaydes, who now has sort of that signature win on his resume. If you look at the guys he's fought, kind of, no name, not any sort of really notable names in there, but now he's got the Mark Hunt on there, and that always looks good on the resume. And again, getting that experience of going into someone's backyard, dealing with the fans and all that stuff, and going in there and taking out a legend in Mark Hunt, I think looks good on Curtis Blaydes. And the heavyweight division, they needed this badly because there are no prospects. Stipe Miocic has pretty much beat all the sort of the top contenders in there, and now you've got Curtis Blaydes, who could be a couple fights away from a title shot now, just with the fact that he got this win. And I want to point out one other thing. You talked about him eating the shots early. I think the fact that he did fight Francis Ngannou earlier, and I remember when that fight was announced, some people are like, oh, why are they putting two prospects together? That's why, because he probably got some experience in that fight that he took into the Hunt fight, and we saw it tonight, because a lot of other fighters would have just been done after those Hunt shots, but Blaydes survived, and he persevered, and he got the W.
Here we are talking about Curtis Blaydes, who is 27. At 26, 27 in a UFC heavyweight division, he could be around 10 to 15 years. Like Mark Hunt is 17 years older than him. And Curtis Blaydes has now faced two guys that have challenged for UFC titles. That's not something you often see on the ascension. That's something you'll see like right there when you get to the top, or maybe the descension. But that UFC heavyweight division, I think, is looking very, very interesting. I like the emergence of Junior Albini, even though he didn't win his last fight. Alexander Volkov. There are a lot of guys. UFC should have picked Bellator clean. They should have got Minikov. They should have got Blagoy Ivanov when he was available. There are a lot of guys that they should have got that I thought would have done them very well. But I mean, Volkov's fighting for Doom, and that's a good matchup. I think that's the smart.
Similar matchup to this one in a way. You prospect against a veteran. If the prospect happens to win, he's got the nice win on his resume, and people are familiar with him because a lot of times, like the odd time, especially when I do the prospects videos, you get someone being like, oh, I don't know who this guy is. Like when Anders fought, there's not a lot of people who know about Anders, but now they know Anders because he fought Machida. So that's what the UFC has to do. They have to, when these guys have had their chance at a title and they're kind of on the tail end, you got to match them up with prospects. That's how you sort of build names going forward.
And somebody in the chat saying Mark Hunt has weak takedown defense. That doesn't scare anybody. Oh, okay. Well, Frank Mir couldn't do much with it. Frank Mir, one of the more accomplished jiu-jitsu players in UFC's heavyweight division ever. Roy Nelson couldn't get it done. I mean, you can say that all you want, but I mean, Mark Hunt's he's not that easy to get underneath because he's so short. And then when you do try to get under him, he'll post his head, he'll roll out, and he'll catch you with a hook or an uppercut or something like that and make you pay for it. Withstanding the shots, the power shots of Mark Hunt, and then immediately being able to land the type of takedown that Curtis Blaydes did, that was impressive to me because Blaydes did know that he had to go back to his bread and butter. He kind of pawed his jab out there, and you could tell that Mark Hunt had timed him for counters, and he was starting to light Blaydes up. Yeah,
it's true. And can we also point out Mark Hunt, 43 years old, by the way? Like,
yeah,
people forget that he's 43. I mean, he's almost as old as Dan Henderson.
Yeah. And now Mark Hunt has one win since 2016.
Since the Obama administration.
Yeah. There you go. And he's fought like nothing but killers. He's fought Curtis Blaydes, who went into tonight as a top 10 heavyweight. He's lost to Alistair Overeem, Brock Lesnar. He lost to Stipe Miocic. He lost to Fabricio Verdum. He lost to Junior Dos Santos. That's since his career resurgence. So he's not getting beat by anything but like top flight guys, in my opinion. While we're on the subject of the heavyweight division, Tai Tuivasa, mother of God, not maybe even beyond his performance in the cage, his performance on the mic after the fight. That guy is full of charisma.
They needed that. Again, another great thing. You got an Australian guy going on the mic. He's undefeated. He's 24 years old. They need stuff like this. I thought there was a couple guys tonight that really took advantage of their mic time, and that's what you have to do. You know, the UFC is not going to promote you unless you're Conor McGregor, and even Conor McGregor does his own self-promoting. So you need to go out there and sort of make a statement. And you know, the fact that we're even talking about his post-fight speech, as incredible as his performance was, just shows you how good that was, right? So I mean, that's what you have to do. And again, I think a big win tonight for the UFC. You know, having this prospect who's, you know, pretty exciting.
That was one of the scariest performances that I've ever seen. Like, somebody told me to to describe it in one word. Ngannou-esque is what it was. Yeah. It was Ngannou-esque. And I am very excited to see this guy, another young heavyweight. And I was telling you off the air, man, if they want a big main event, like if they want a co-main event in Australia, Tuivasa versus Mark Hunt, my God, that'll put asses in seats if they want to go that route. The kind of local versus the local, per se. Like, what can you say? That was such a one-sided ass-kicking affair. Poor Asker, man. And, like, he wasn't some scrub. He was, I think he went into the fight 2-1 in the UFC.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
yeah, no.
Like, I saw a lot of people saying, like, terrible matchmaking. Tuivasa had one UFC fight. I don't think this was bad matchmaking at all. It was a guy who was, okay, he was 2-2 in the UFC going into this, but had two pretty early finishes heading into this. So I thought it was a fair match to make. And Tuivasa, I think you give him, I don't know about a big name or anything like that, but 24, he'll be 25 soon. He's emerged. People know who he is. People are talking about this guy.
Yeah. When's I was talking to someone about this the other day. When's Ben Rothwell back? He's a guy that they could use right now.
Yeah.
You know, like he had the USADA flag. It was flagged by USADA, so I wonder when he's going to come back. But this is where, you know, people say, you know, some of the free agents that left to go to Bellator, you know, they're you know, saying like it's not a big deal, but you know, this is where you could have these guys. Like a Matt Mitrione would be like a perfect, you know, guy for Blaydes right now. You know, like they need guys like this, and they don't have them because they're in Bellator, you know, just hanging out. So I think they are missing it from that perspective, because really there's a lot of no-name heavyweights out there right now, and I think that's what they're going to have to do going forward, because there just isn't a lot of options at this point. They're moving around the musical chairs, but there's only so much combinations they can do.
Yeah, Ben Rothwell he was notified last March, so it's probably going to be a while for him.
Yeah.
It seems like, and Tuivasa is a good indication, and Curtis Blaydes to a degree, it seems like over the past like maybe 6 to 8 months, we've seen more fresh faces emerge, more people just being talked about, the Colby Covingtons, the Darren Teals, even James Vick to a degree. Like, there are these new fresh guys, Ngannou too, like just some guys that just, like, they had a lot of promise and all that, but like you're seeing them put themselves out there, and they're either charismatic on the microphone or they're charismatic in performance to that degree. And I thought Tuivasa had it all right there. The UFC has got to be hoping that this guy really just is the star that Mark Hunt was for that area for a while. And you can draw so many similarities from body type to fighting style to location, and they're both like Samoan guys. Like, it's so weird. It's really like I can't call him a mini me because he's so much bigger than Mark Hunt. It's just kind of cool, the parallels between these two.
And fighting on the same card as Mark Hunt again.
Do you think he'll hit Vanderlei Silva with his ass too?
He might, yeah. I don't know. We'll have to see. Maybe they can make that. It'll be tough now with Vanderlei and Bellator, right? But you never know. But no, again, I think what you're seeing is the UFC has to fill up these cards. They have so many fighters on the roster. You have a lot of their superstars just not fighting right now, or for various reasons. And so they have to give these other opportunities to other people. And I think it's good. You know, I've always said this, you know, treat this like a sport. Get the prospects in the spotlight, get the up and comers. They need to do a better job of that. And, you know, I think we need to sort of focus on the new wave that's coming through, because, you know, there's always a transition in MMA. And I like seeing these prospects like we've seen tonight sort of get their shine.
Jake Matthews defeated Li Jingliang, and my God, this had one of the most egregious fouls I've ever seen in my life, James. A straight-up Ric Flair eye gouge to get out of a guillotine choke. No point deduction. How do you miss that?
And he saw him. I don't get that either. I mean, that right there, in my opinion, should have been a DQ. I mean, it was clear as day. How did they not, or how does the referee not call that? I don't know. It's very weird. I mean, you know, the good news is Matthews ended up winning, but I mean, that could have been like a really sore spot, pun intended, for this fight. So, and you know, good on Matthews. I mean, this is a guy that, you know, had lost 2 in a row at lightweight, looked like he was going to be one of those busts from the Ultimate Fighter, and now he's won 2 in a row at welterweight, and he's looking pretty good. You know, I think to be able to overcome something as unfortunate as that, for him to sort of persevere, I think is awesome.
They were chucking and ducking not long after that. It was a hell of a fight. You know, I don't know what the bonuses are yet. We have Jeremy Lambert over on the FightfulMMA.com or the Fightful MMA Twitter account. Go give us a follow. He'll keep us updated on that as well. Shaw does say that Romero missing weight won't stop him from getting a title shot against Whitaker. What do you think about that? Because, I mean, he did just beat Whitaker, or Whitaker did just beat him last year.
I mean, at this point, if you can figure out the pieces, if they can work, I mean, there's people saying that Calvin Gastelum, you know, should deserve it, but then he just lost to Weidman like a fight before that. So yeah. It's I don't know. It's tough. It's really, I wouldn't be upset if they did the rematch right now. The other thing we have to remember with Romero, I mean, it doesn't look like he's slowing down, but he's 40. So, I mean, how much longer does he plan to fight? Who knows? But so maybe you do cash in on that now, but I don't know. I think it's tough because who really could? I mean, who would Romero fight? I guess it would be like a Weidman, or maybe do the Jacare rematch. I don't know. But at this point, I think you give. I mean, this is a huge win for him to knock out Rockhold the way he did, and you know, just in a highlight reel fashion. I think I wouldn't have a problem with him fighting Whitaker at this point. I know he missed weight, but he also beat Luke Rockhold. So.
Personally, what I would do at this stage, I would put on, because you don't know how long Whitaker's out right now. He might be out for a year for all we know. He's got a stomach infection. That stuff could reemerge. I would put on Souza and Weidman, and I would put on Gastelum and Romero, and just whoever. Like I can't remember the situation a few years ago. I think Machida was involved, but it's like whoever looked the most impressive out of that series of fights was going to get a title shot. And I think that's the way to do it, depending on when Whitaker's back, because I do know that they're trying to get at least 1, maybe 2 title fights on each show. But as far as Jake Matthews goes, I hope he gets some sort of bonus for his win, because he deserves it. Also, his 6th UFC win. He is 23 years old. If he wins 1 more before August, he'll join John Jones, one of his buddies, at 7 before that. Max Holloway had 10 before his 24th birthday, which is insane to think. But I love that fight. I thought it was good outside of the really weird eye gouge. Like that was horrible. Tyson Pedro had quite the submission victory. And the thing is, he didn't even have the double wrist lock like applied the way that you would like to. You'd ideally want to shark fin the arm and kind of rotate the shoulder. But he grabbed Safarov from a kind of a lazy cage takedown attempt and just grabbed it, had the Kimura sweep, double wrist lock sweep, put him to bed. Tyson Pedro getting it done like he needed to. He's a top 15 guy fighting a guy out of the top 15. He ran into Ilir Latifi in September, and that kind of derailed his hype train a little bit, because Ilir Latifi capitalized on what he knew that Tyson Pedro wasn't necessarily good at. But back on the right track here.
Yeah, and again, good matchmaking here as well. You know, you've got a 26-year-old who's, you know, fighting at home, and he's facing a guy who had a bit of a layoff. I mean, we have to remember Safarov hadn't fought since I think it was December of 2016. So, and he was coming off a loss as well. So, you know, you give him a nice highlight reel win, which is what he got, and now you move forward and you know, you match him up accordingly, and you get back on that horse, and you know, you see what happens. You know, Latifi's a pretty good fighter for that division, so losing to him, I don't think it's a huge step back, but I mean, he's sort of in that middle tier now, and you know, no need to rush this guy. He's 26 years old. The division's a little bit you know, kind of big drop off after the top 3, so to speak, but give this guy some time. And I think you know, the UFC should be, anytime they have a card in Australia, they should be putting these, you know, younger guys on there and giving them the spotlight and really sort of, you know, building it around. And I thought it was a great performance tonight.
I'd like to see Safarov get another fight. I mean, they threw him in there unranked against a couple of guys who at the time were top 15 guys. Just give him 1 more. Why not? And I mean, with as many weight cut misses and like injuries as we've had, you could slide him in there at some point. Just here, Formiga defeated Ben Nguyen, and Formiga, this title shot has like eluded him for so long. This was a top 10 win for him. He's now won 3 out of 4. probably his best streak outside of the Jorgensen, Makovsky, Wilson Hayes wins. And, he dropped a fight to Henry Cejudo that probably would have gotten him a title shot had he won. Do you think Formiga can get to that point? Because it seems like the UFC has been keen on the idea of him getting a title shot. He was in the tournament, or he had the fight with Dodson back in the day, which would have gotten him a title fight. And it looked like they were putting him in position against Cejudo. But his issue has always been fighting those guys, the John Dodsons, the Benavidez, the McCalls, Cejudo, Borg, that have reached the top of the division. He's ran into trouble there. He didn't run into trouble tonight. He pinned Ben Nguyen, and Ben Nguyen's defensive wrestling has been like his downfall, and that opened up a sick spinning back fist that set up a rear naked choke.
Yeah, this fight couldn't have gone better for Formiga. He does, highlight reel win. He gets the, spinning back fist to submission. Just a great performance. And, when was the last time we said that about a flyweight fight, to be honest? I mean, you don't really see anything that notable, especially with guys that aren't named Demetrius Johnson. So one thing I pointed out tonight, this is, Formiga hasn't won 2 fights in a row in the UFC since like 2015. So, I mean, it just goes to show he's, while he is, getting some of these impressive wins, he's also been very inconsistent as far as creating momentum. And hopefully this is a sign of things to turn a corner here. Cause I mean, right now flyweight needs contenders. And I think he's probably your guy at this point, especially getting an impressive win here. If Demetrius is fighting TJ Dillashaw, give him a higher ranked guy at this point, sort of figure it out. I know he's fought a lot of those guys already, but, if we're just looking here, maybe give him, well, I mean, the thing is Pettis is coming off a loss. Maybe you give him, I don't know.
You don't want to ruin a contender, but who else is there? Yeah.
Maybe you, this might be a bit of a jump. Maybe you give him someone like Nicolau or something. I don't know. I think like you kind of, you got to see what else is out there. I mean, here's a guy who's he's been set up, it seems like, to be, on the cusp of a title shot, and he's blown it. So, at this point, if he really is a guy that's going to hang with Demetrius Johnson, maybe you got to fight an up and coming prospect or something like that.
Davison Figueiredo, I believe his name is. He's 3-0 in the UFC.
Yeah. That's another.
And the thing is, Formiga came in around that time where we didn't know who the best flyweight in the world was, because they fought like, unless you were well versed in like Tachi Palace fights, you just weren't that sure who maybe the best in the world was. There were so many question marks around it because a lot of them were fighting in 135 at that point. But I thought that he looked great. Also, Izzy Adesanya defeated Rob Wilkinson, and he overcame some adversity and put together just a disgusting combo. There were some troubling things, like he didn't fight the underhooks and stuff like that. But I mean, you're talking about a guy who is very much a kickboxer who's 12-0, defeated Melvin Gillard last year, which isn't saying a lot these days. But
well, I was going to say, they brought that up on the broadcast, and I'm like, is that really notable at this point?
No, it's sad, man. It's sad.
I mean, it's really sad. Actually, Melvin's fighting this month. I don't know if you saw. He's fighting someone, and
he fights every month.
He's lost his last like 3 fights by first round knockout. It's not pretty. We're getting on the verge of one of those. ESPN
he's lost I think he's lost 7 straight fights. No, he had the win over Rickles, but it got overturned because he got
cocaine?
Popped.
I can't remember. It was something he got popped for. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, banned substance. So he technically hasn't won in his last 7 fights. But oh man, and it's funny because I've said this on the show before. I think on the night that Melvin Gillard defeated Evan Dunham, he would have beaten any lightweight in the world that night. I don't know that I've seen a better performance out of him, and I thought he was at the top. But this was not the Gillard that Adesanya beat. But
no. They just had to mention on the broadcast just to get some sort of correlation there. I guess. I mean, I get it, but no, Israel, Izzy, he looked great tonight. Again, there are some areas to improve on, but it's definitely, we talked about the middleweight division sort of, being kind of cluttered at the moment, but you don't have a ton of prospects, so it's good to have him in the mix here. Don't rush him. I see people already talking about, giving him, I don't know, I've seen some different names out there, but just don't rush this guy. He's exciting. He's clearly good on the mic. You talking about post-fight, getting on the mic there. He was great. Reminded me a lot of, they mentioned the parallels between him and John Jones. I got that a lot just from even the way he talks. It's very interesting. So this guy's great. Get him in the US. Let's get some American exposure there, because this guy's exciting, and I think that's what they need in the division, is getting exciting prospects like this.
Yeah, outside of that, I thought that sometimes his knees would set up body locks and clinches from Wilkinson, and that's something I'm sure that he'll learn like not to do. He had trouble like avoiding some transitional grappling scenarios, which he's going to. He's very much a pure striker. So that was another good performance. Alexander Volkanovski, that guy's looking good. He put a beating on Jeremy Kennedy. What is it about these guys? They talk to you and they get their asses kicked. Like, are you cursed? Curtis broke that, though.
Well, Anders should have won last week. Let's point that out.
He should have. Yeah. Yes, he should have.
Yeah. So interesting thing about this, like Kennedy wanted this fight. Like he asked for it even before. I mean, they were supposed to fight a couple months back and Kennedy got injured. So he takes this fight in Volkanovski's backyard. I mean, I think for him, he just wanted to figure out where he sort of fits in the division. And obviously he's got a lot of work to do. I mean, I think, on paper, this, the odds and everything was a bit closer than people thought, but this wasn't close at all. Basically, when Kennedy was taken down, he seemed kind of like a fish out of water, didn't really know what to do to get back up. And he was eating shots. And you know what? As much as people are already starting to write off Kennedy or whatever, I think this in some ways is good for him because he'll learn from this the same way that, like a Rory McDonald, gets a TKO loss to Carlos Condit and goes to TriStar and gets better. I sort of look at this with Kennedy as well, being 25 years old, going into someone's backyard like this. I think you can only take good things away from it. But let's talk about Volkanovski. Just a dominant performance. And again, another guy I'd like to see them bring over to the States and really sort of showcase his skill set because he's another guy, very charismatic and obviously has a pretty exciting style as well too, with the ground and pound and everything. So, just very impressed by him and 17-1. That is not that's not a record to, think twice at. So I'd really like to see him fight, a nice veteran after this. I think he called out, was it Andre Fili and Stevens, do him and Fili. I'd love to see that fight. That'd be great.
Oh, I would too. That's a good one. One of my favorite things about this fight was when Kennedy grabbed a single leg and Volkanovski was able to turn the corner quicker than he was and just threw him down to the ground. Yeah. I was like, ooh, wow. This fight was a major ass kicking for Volkanovski. He's now 4-0 in the UFC. And like you said, 17-1 he's won like 14 fights in a row. What a great performance. What a great performance. And a lot of the guys that the UFC needed to win tonight did, even if they weren't necessarily from the local area, like Curtis Blaydes, they needed him to win. Mark Hunt will probably draw the same number of people the next time he's there, whether he would have won or lost this fight. Tai Tuivasa, they needed him to win because he's just got that. Jake Matthews, local guy, he won and he beat Lee, who is on a hot streak in doing so. Tyson Pedro, a top 15 guy, won. Adesanya, prospect, won. Volkanovski, local guy, prospect, won. Formiga, a guy near the top of the division for the title, won. What else on this show stood out to you?
Well, Ross Pearson lives another day, gets the win over Hirota. And again, when I saw this, this matchup on paper, I said they want Ross Pearson to get this win, and that's good. Ross is an exciting guy. He's only 33. I mean, it's not like he's like when you look at Ross Pearson, you think of the wars he's been in. You're thinking mid 30s, maybe close to 40, but he's still a relatively young guy. And fighting a guy in Hirota, he missed weight against Charles Rosa. The fight was canceled, and then of course he hadn't fought, I think, until like a year before that. So it's been a while for him. So just factoring that in, you got Pearson, who's a guy who's he's coming off a knockout, so he really needed to sort of show that he still can stick around. And I thought that was a sort of a feel-good story. Not that Pearson's gonna go on some title run after this, but it is nice to see him sort of stick around because I think he had 4 losses in a row or something like that. And that most people get cut after 3, but I think because of the fact he's an exciting guy, he lives to see another day. So that to me was kind of a feel-good story as far as something that happened on the prelims.
Back in the day, it used to be 2, sometimes 1.
Yeah. Well, you still get guys that have won fights every now and then get cut. A
lot of times they'll bring guys in on short notice fights. They'll give them that 1 loss because it's almost expected to some degree, and give them 1 more and then they're gone because many of those guys shouldn't have even been there to begin with. They're just a warm body to throw in a cage. But they gave Ross Pearson as much leeway as they could and the right opponent, and he won. So. There you go. I think he's 24 fights deep in the UFC. Crazy.
Yeah, it is nuts.
This show, it's not going to do big numbers. What kind of numbers do you think we're looking at here?
It's tough to say. I mean, I think I kind of gauge it on like social media and then everything else. I don't really know like a specific number I could put it on, but I'll just say that it's probably going to do below average of what a normal card does. I mean, the Rockhold and you know, even with Whitaker being out, I think in some ways that this fight was almost a little bit more exciting for the average fan because people know Romero from, you know, knocking out Weidman and everything else. So I think that I think it'll do okay. But again, it was sort of a top heavy card. If you look down here, I mean, I'm looking at this card. And this reminds me of like a Canadian card that they would have, and that's usually like a fight night. So, you know, I'm not expecting anything big. I don't think there were people, you know, I didn't get texts from my friends saying, "Oh, I got to rush home and watch this fight." I think it's, I'll catch it the next day type of conversation.
Yeah, it's funny because towards the end of last year, I was complimenting the UFC for really stacking their show, even if not for marquee names, then for fun fights on paper. This I wouldn't have said was like a super fun fight on paper because a lot of these could have been some strikers getting laid on for a while, which a lot of people accuse the co-main event of being. I didn't see that. I had somebody calling Blaydes the heavyweight John Fitch, and I was like, "You're high off your ass." He threw punches, he threw elbows, he was working, and he not only that, he took Mark Hunt down about a dozen times. But this was a fun show. I enjoyed the show. A lot of great finishes. A lot of optimism on this show moving forward in the future. So a good show overall. I mean, like I said, nothing world changing in that regard. No new champion at all.
No,
but we got Blaydes on the post fight. He wants to be in the video game. He misses an opportunity to call out Cain Velasquez on the broadcast. He called him out in the post fight presser. What do you think about Curtis Blaydes and Cain Velasquez? Cain hasn't fought in, I think, since the Civil War.
Yeah, something like that. It was back when they were doing the Back to the Future movies, I think.
Yeah.
You know, great fight. Again, like, you know, Cain's been out forever. DC's fighting Stipe. Cain needs a dance partner. I don't think people want to see him fight Junior Dos Santos again. And Dos Santos, I think, is still out anyway. So let's do it up. Another prospect.
I like that.
You know, I think it makes so much sense. If Cain's ready to go, let's do it. And by the way, get a backup fight for Cain, because in case something happens, you just have to.
Oh yeah, I would have a couple of big heavyweight fights on that card. Have that as a co-main and something underneath it. Kind of slide that in there. You might want to have another opponent for Curtis Blaydes because Cain might not make it.
One other thing I just want to mention about this card that we didn't talk about, Jimmy Smith making his debut on the commentary booth.
God, he was great.
Seamless. Yeah, I really, you know, I saw some people tweeting about this, and I agree. It felt like him and Anik had been working for years. It really was, like, to me, a good broadcast is where you don't notice, like, it just, you don't have to point anything out because it's just so smooth. And that's sort of what we got tonight. I mean, there's no, you know, blunders, no mistakes, just lots of good insight. You know, I felt you know, from start to finish, I thought Jimmy Smith did a great job. And I think, you know, Bellator made a huge mistake, in my opinion, letting him go, because he's just so knowledgeable. And I think the UFC really gained sort of someone on their A side.
All due respect to Jay Glazer and the guys that they have over at Bellator, I thought they did a pretty good job last time, but it seemed like they lost their identity with Jimmy Smith being gone, because I'm always used to, even if I'm like kind of working and not paying attention to what's going on Bellator, I'm used to hearing that voice out of like my right ear. I'm used to hearing Jimmy Smith calling the action and offering insight, and he fit in so well. This is the golden age for UFC color commentators, because I think that Daniel Cormier is exceptional. If Dominic Cruz added a little more pep, I think that he would become more popular. And Joe Rogan, you know, I like Joe Rogan with a Dominic Cruz, especially, and with a Daniel Cormier. And now you got Jimmy Smith. And so you're going to have great color commentators on almost any broadcast. So I think it's great. We have the Holy Smokes MMA podcast Tuesday, guys. Make sure you all tune in. We every week we feature guest or pros picks that James Lynch gets for us. Like he interviews some of the best names. I said to James, I think it was, or at least I said it on the air. Now, whenever fights are announced, we have a thumbnail from one of your video interviews from Fightful that goes up with it, because I think this week alone you interviewed half the roster.
Yeah, it's a lot. I actually added it up today because I was just curious, because, you know, I was on vacation like the last 2 weeks. I was trying to work in between here, and I did, for all the outlets I work for, I did 27 interviews this week.
My God.
And a good chunk of those for Fightful. So yeah, it gets busy, but I mean, I just always think like I want to get these fighters before someone else does, or I want to get, and it's not like I'm doing it too far in advance. So because we've had some injuries here and there too. So it's been, I love doing this. So it works out great.
And one of the things I like is you're so good about getting up and coming guys that a lot of people don't even think to interview, and then they turn into Colby Covington. Yeah. And look at Colby Covington, and Zach Freeman. He called you out at the post-fight press
in a good way, yeah.
Because you were the only person that would talk to him.
Yeah, and again, that was from I think I mentioned this on the industry podcast, but I mean Freeman, I interviewed back when he was supposed to fight for Titan FC. Or I was supposed to interview him for Titan FC, and then that card got canceled. And then I ended up interviewing him for RFA, and then he's fighting Aaron Pico. And then I'm like, oh, well, I remember him. I have his number, so I'll get a hold of him. And it just worked out well because, of course, he won that night. So I think for anyone watching out there, you got to interview everyone. I think it's important because you never know what's going to happen. Like Eric Anders just fought last week and he headlined an event. I mean, I interviewed him after his second pro fight.
Yeah.
I thought, here's a guy who's, an NCAA football champion and he's in MMA. This is an interesting story to me. So I always kept tabs on him and always did interviews with him. And now look at him. So it's good to get everyone because there's always interesting stories out there.
I used to get offered interviews from TNA Wrestling all the time. And my boss would be like, do you even care? Do you want to interview this guy? And I'm like, yeah. And now I have about half a dozen people who work for WWE in my phone if I need to get a hold of them for anything because they had complete roster turnover. I remember when I worked for a small outlet and they said, hey, would you want to interview Matt Riddle? Like, I know he doesn't have as big a name as he used to. And we talked pro wrestling 4 years ago. Ended up doing a show with the guy. You never know what'll happen. You never know what'll happen. So guys, make sure you all subscribe at youtube.com/Fightful. Also subscribe to James's page as well. And head over to Fightful.com, FightfulMMA.com. We have all kinds of news up there for you, all kinds of exclusives. Go to that tab. James has pros picks that go up all the time too. Lots of stuff. And James, where can they follow you on Twitter?
Yeah, that's the easiest way to find all my work. At Lynch on Sports. Going to be doing a bunch of stuff this week as far as interviews and everything. Got some stuff scheduled on Monday. Don't want to reveal those yet because I never like to announce ahead of time if I'm interviewing someone in case something happens. But I got a couple good interviews lined up on Monday, so stay tuned for that. And of course, the MMA Industry Podcast returning this Thursday.
Love that show.
We had a great show last week with Farah. If you guys haven't seen that one, it was just it was great. So definitely check that out.
Sign her.
What's that?
I want to sign her.
Yeah. Oh, she's great.
She's awesome. She's awesome. Hey, that show is a pretty good recruiting tool for me too.
There you go.
Seeing these people.
Speaking of up and comers, yeah, I'm getting I'm trying to get, I'm going to get a mix. I'm going to try and get some bigger names going forward as far as, like your Ariel Hawanis, who by the way has agreed to do the show, Chuck Mendenhall, guys like that. They will come on in later times, but I like getting the up and comers. There's a lot of really good journalists out there. And
you already had me. So,
well, of course. Yeah, that was the first guest. And Joe. We gotta get Jimmy on. We got to get Jimmy on at some point too. Get the Fightful trifecta.
Also, before we go, somebody said your Tim Johnson interview about the GoFundMe was very cool, and somebody mentioned Paul Felder, also another excellent commentator.
Very good.
Guys, follow me at Sean Ross Sapp. Follow us at Fightful online. Subscribe, like, thumbs up. Let people know about it. Our MMA site is growing rapidly. You got to get the word out for us. Until next time, guys, we are out.